And trying to really instill in the Toronto community a sense of becoming better poets, both as creative writers and also as business people, because let's be honest, if you want to take this seriously as a poet and make your living doing this, you have to have a bit of some business acumen. So that's why we decided to have this panel here today featuring poets who make their living being poets, which is a very rare thing, but a doable thing, as you'll learn today. We are going to have a session at the end for you to ask questions of the panelists, so save the questions and write them down as they come up, because we really encourage a lot of audience interaction. So I'll introduce to you the host and the panelists, and then Tanya will take it away from there. So please welcome our host, Tanya Newmeyer. And our panelist, Nishai Morgan. And he's got to go when he comes here.
We like you.
Good evening, everyone. Thanks for coming out in the frigid temperatures.
So frigid.
It's so cold. Let's give them the welcome they know and they deserve. Give it up for Mr. Dwayne Morgan, the one and only Lishai Peel. I'm going to introduce Ian Petticoat like that when I see him bound up the stairs. So he maybe, had something at the other Magic Oven in the East End. I don't know. So he'll be here soon. We apologize on his behalf, but we're very pleased to have all three artists here eventually, and we're happy that we can have this conversation. So I'm going to lead us off with a few questions that I've been thinking of, harboring. And we're gonna go from there.
Before we start, you guys know that I'm big into energy. Can we just do the whole, rubbing the hands together?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Sending energy forward. Thank you. Okay. Awesome.
I'm sending mine to Dwayne.
And it's hot. Maybe a little lower that.
Okay.
It's just Andre.
Give me on a scale of 1 to 10. How well can you hear me when I just use my theater voice?
I can hear
I can hear you.
Oh, no, that was like a...
It's okay. All the way to the back?
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Well, if we want a mic, it's here. But maybe we can keep this a little more intimate, which is very nice.
So
There's almost so many of us that we could have a circle, but I guess that would undefine the panel aspects. So
and we don't have any drums.
we don't have any drums.
Where's the
Let's stick with this for now.
Don't go in there.
So
I know, why is it so hot up here?
you might get a striptease because it's really hot up here.
Yeah!
Business just picked up.
Boots.
Yeah. Boots first.
So my first question is a question you probably get asked a lot as you carry yourself across the city and across the continent. It's about defining yourself as an artist. So some of us in the room are very familiar with what you do. Some of us have no idea. I'd like you to surprise those of us who know you very well by giving us two versions of your bio. One version of your bio that is in one-liner phrase, this is what I am, this is who I am, this is what I do as an artist, and the long extended paragraph version as well. So my first question is, how do you define your work as an artist in this bio format?
You want me to repeat my bio?
Yeah, how would you define yourself in just one-liner phrase? We should start with that from both of you. We'll give you equal thinking time. How about that?
I feel like I'm being quizzed.
You are, just a little bit. There are no right or wrong answers. We love you no matter what.
I am a creator and facilitator.
I am a magical unicorn.
All right, so to elaborate on what you create and how you facilitate and what kind of magic you pull off with your unicorn, Nis, can you please give us the paragraph? Oh, Give it up one time for Mr. Ian.
And his hat.
So, Ian, we're just getting started. We wanted to set the stage. We're very glad you made it. Thank you
So
for
sorry,
coming.
everyone. So sorry.
It's okay.
If you want a mic, it's here, but we've found that people can hear us, so we're keeping it intimate style.
Huh?
Yeah. Do that, Eddie. If I get too quiet, sometimes I like to be quiet. It's more likely me. They have to say. So I've asked if you were to introduce yourself. This is Pop Quiz. You just walked in the door. Take a deep breath. Let's all do that together. Welcome Eddie with a deep breath. All the way in, all the way up. One more time, all the way in. To your toes, all the way up. Yeah.
You might want to get that checked out.
Yeah. All right, good to be here with all of you. So, if you were to define yourself in one line or phrase, kind of bio style, how would you describe what you do?
I like to play with words and experiment with them.
Nice, very good. So, the next follow-up to this question is elaboration. Can you tell us what it looks like to create, what it sounds like to be a unicorn, what it's tastes like? I don't know. Use your senses, right? We can go in any order. So I'd just like you to elaborate on what you do, how you do it.
Okay, since I went with the whole magical unicorn stuff, I'll go with it. So,
Go with it. You made your
a unicorn is a mythical creature, and much like a unicorn is a mythical creature, poetry can be quite elusive. So I work on the daily to cultivate that poetry that exists within me. And like one of our teachers, actually, you know her, Jambiad Latat, she once said, I write to know the person I don't know I am. So I chose to be a poet so that I could further cultivate the relationship with myself and with the stories that exist within me and with the magic that exists in storytelling.
I approach poetry like communication, and I feel because we're so bombarded with words and language all the time, the messages that hit us the most effectively and the messages that stay with us are those that surprise us and those that move us in different ways. So if it's music, if it's art, if it's movies, if it's poetry, there's an element of surprise, there's an element of interest, there's an element of the different. And I think spoken word, if it's great, is able to make you think about things that you've already thought about, but in different ways. I liken it to a magician showing new tricks and surprising people and creating new realities with what they do.
And I would say for myself as a creator, I just look for unique ways to tell stories. As a facilitator, I try to create platforms for others to share their stories.
When Brother Sequence, I can do some promo work. One thing we'll get to hear a little bit about is how Dwayne does his promotions work. I think many of us know him on the scene as doing that really well. So When Sisters Speak is coming up January 25th at the
St. Lawrence
St. Lawrence Center for the Arts.
Saturday.
I hesitated. Yeah, so check it out this Saturday. See, I'm well trained. So I want to actually, before we get into what the shows and gigs look like and how you build them up, I wanted to start by being grounded in that magic that you cultivate, that creation that you do. So I'd like to start by talking about your work. You may or may not be familiar with Word Warriors, a book about 35 women in the spoken word revolution. It's American. It's a really nice kind of platform that I thought of that links to what we're doing here tonight, because what the book does is it ties people's stories to what their work is and talks about what their existence as a poet is like. So we want to get into the hustle part, but first, your work. Can you tell us a little bit about what was the first poem that really brought you into the scene? Whether you want to define that externally in terms of points, etc., or something internally that made you feel like, oh, I'm here. And then what's the most recent piece that's really like pushing your edges somehow, that is new work that you're cultivating and you're maybe struggling with, or you're trying out a new medium? I know that there's very interesting stories of where each of you come from, and we'd like to hear a bit about that, and hear also kind of where are you really at right now. So again, we can go in any order, and whoever wants to start, go ahead.
Spoken word for me was always an abstract art form, which I didn't necessarily could put a name to, but I saw in various places. I moved to Ottawa from Calgary a few years back, and some people in the scene were getting really into the deaf poets. So I'm definitely from a school of thought that really idolized and researched and really appreciated the work that was coming out of there, particularly with a lot of poets from the East Coast. And then go to find that there's a huge scene in Canada. There's individuals such as Dwayne Morgan who are doing wonderful things, and sort of gave us the platform to experiment with our work over time and develop it.
I think for myself, probably Eddie the original one and myself, we come from a whole different era of this, so we've seen and experienced many different waves of things that have happened with spoken word over that time. I mean, I can't really say that there was a piece that really, did whatever, because at the time when I was starting, there weren't really a lot of platforms to perform, so I created my platform, so it wasn't like a piece did anything for me. I did what I needed to do, and then created spaces for other people.
Nice.
I think the thing about YouTube is that it's a reflection of where you are at a certain moment. And when I first started spoken word, my whole project was not so much spoken word as much as just finding my voice. Because I come from a legacy of women who have been silenced. And so for me, it was just a revolution to be able to step on stage and share my voice with other people. But when I look at YouTube and I look at the things that I was writing at the very beginning, it's like, oh God, why was this platform created? Someone get me off YouTube. But I think the poem that really helped me come into myself was the one about I have stones in my throat. And then since then, I've been writing really deeply, and I've been excavating a lot, and now I write from a place of celebration and gratitude, because that's where I'm at. So I'm trying to not shy away from the fact that when I was writing stuff at the beginning, I was not writing from a place that was authentically me. I was writing other people's stories instead of writing my own stories. I'm just giving thanks for the right now, the fact that I am writing my own story. And where I'm at right now is a lot of poetry and getting into theatre work as well. And like I said, writing from a place of celebration.
I'm curious about a couple things. I'll just ask you a follow-up question here. To follow on, a couple of you spoke about the communities you've come from in terms of Ottawa and building a show, Dwayne, and then also the extended community of the Shire, what happens online. So I wonder if there's a venue or a show that you're really, really thankful for to have had a chance to perform at. And conversely, I mean, it makes sense for us to talk a bit about Poetry Slam here. So maybe conversely, maybe not. I know the opinions will vary. So is there a show that's or a venue or a forum or a scene, like the slam scene in Ottawa, that's inspired you, challenged you? What have you taken from where you've been, and what do you think you've given or offered? Gratitude.
Well, maybe I'll jump in and talk about From the Roots. Well, Toronto Poetry Slam and From the Roots is definitely where I first started getting into the slam community. The funny thing is that Dwayne didn't talk to me for like 2 years. He would always say, look at me, nod his head, how's it going, and then nothing. It took me a good 2 years until he would say more than one sentence to me. But now we're tight, we're good now. The slam community has definitely helped me and has helped me cultivate that relationship with myself and with my stories. But I sometimes find that we get stuck on the slam community. I think we get stuck on, the sort of mini fame that the slam community gives us. And okay, so right now, some of you may have met him. I'm with this guy who is a b-boy, and he kind of broke it down to me when we first started dating. He's like, I'm not a break dancer, I'm a b-boy, and for him, he lives the culture of hip hop. It's how he was raised. That's his culture. That's how he lives. So I kind of thought about the slam community. I'm like, well, poetry it's just so much bigger than slam. In the same way that b-boying is a way of life, and breaking is just the medium, slam is just the medium for us poets. And so where I'm at right now is, giving thanks for the slam community that helped me find my voice and that held me up as I was doing that important work. But I'm in the business of expanding who I am. So that means expanding out of the slam community.
Yeah, I think that's super important, and it's also important to remember that all of the spoken word artists, most of them that we see living as poets, many of them, a good majority of them, have come from the slam. And so the slam has been a great platform for a lot of artists to step out from. But at the end of the day, I think in terms of making a living as a poet or being a poet, you have to realize that there's only so many slams that you can win, and $50 here, $80 here, it really doesn't do anything. There was a time in Ottawa where a bunch of us, we would be slamming to eat, right? Like we would slam to be able to buy groceries for food. But you can't do that. I mean, you know what I mean? So, people are going to go hungry if that's the case. So it's about inventing new ideas to make capital out of your art, but definitely using it as a platform. We go to CFSW. It's a great opportunity for poets from around the scene to witness your work, bookers, festival agents, etc., etc. So definitely the slam, for me and for many of the poets that I know who are full-time poets, it's definitely been a catalyst for bringing them to actualize what they do now.
I think for myself, there was a show called All Truth Spoken, or Poetry in Motion, which was the biggest poetry event series that was happening in Toronto at the time when I was just getting ready to start out, and that was put on by a poet named Black Cat. And he just had so many people coming out to check out the events, and it just sparked how I thought and how I chose to do things.
So it's amazing to get to hear about kind of the context, the milieu that sounds like a big word, like the scene you're coming out of. I'm gonna take it a little bit. I'm gonna probe you a little more to say, hey, let's really think about this. And this is partially my lens, and we're gonna open up to questions at the end. Or Ian, you alluded to the moment or the possibility of being able to earn a living as a poet. So we're gonna go there, but I'm curious about, that's the next question. Get ready for it. But who were you with? What was it like? I want to know a little bit. We talked a bit about a community, but to zero in on it, who've been the people that have made a difference to you? That I know, that, for example, Lishai and Dwayne, you've been on a team together. You've worked hard. You've got group pieces I've seen from Saskatoon. You were on a championship team. Ian, you recently worked with the TPS team and brought them, to the first place title as well. So that's kind of something that you've done more recently. I know you from a long time. I don't know you from that long time because you've come newly, and Dwayne, I've kind of been like Lishai, so I can, through my own lens. So I've known you from the first CFSW when I ever walked in the room, right? You were hosting the thing, like, you know, that was your venue. So so I know that the relationships in the room really make a big difference, and
Sorry, we just keep saying CFSW and a couple other acronyms and things that
Oh.
not everyone in the room might be on top of. So if
Thank
some
you.
of those things can be clarified.
CFSW stands for Centipede
Walrus.
Falling Slow Walrus. Or the Canadian Festival of Spoken Word, which is a national competition of poetry slam.
And please do, Alyssa or anyone else, the invitation is there to call us on anything that might be, I'm kind of alluding to this, that I want to be able to get kind of detailed glimpse into the inside of what it's like to be these people, so that we can understand from the inside out how they earn a living. But on the broader structural terms,
I want money.
money. Do you have money for us today? Did you come with $5 in your pocket? Tens? No,
How to
okay.
rob a poet.
Don't you have $1?
Was it okay? Yeah, but
Huh?
I'm still asking for $1.
All right.
Well, actually, it's gone up 1,000 now, but that's no story.
Canadian Festival of Spoken Word that started like ballpark 10 years ago was the Spoken Word Olympics in the first year. Maybe Dwayne was there, I'm not sure. Yes. I don't think, Lishai, I kind of know more about when you came on the scene. So
So the question is
the question is, yeah.
the people that have helped shape the direction of the film.
Yeah, who made a difference to your being here now?
I think the number one thing for me when I came into spoken word was finding mentors, finding people that could tell me about the context within which I'm immersed, and how to start cultivating that relationship that I keep talking about, that relationship with myself, which is linked with my relationship to my poetry. So Dwayne has mentored me for the last couple of years and helped me really understand the business of being a spoken word artist and given me some of the inside scoop. And recently I've been mentored by Debbie Young, who's really helped me get in touch with the spiritual side of my poetry. And along the way, you know, I've had a lot of mentors who've come in and out, like not in a sustained way, but people that I learned from. But I think my biggest teachers has been the work that I do with youth and the community work that I do. That for me helps me really link my everyday artistic practice with gratitude, and it feeds me in more ways than just monetarily. So for me, it really, I know it sounds a little bit cliche, but it really is the young people that I work with, and some of the things that they say, because young people, they don't filter as much as we do, and some of the poetry that they write is the most beautiful I've ever heard. And I'll leave it at that.
I think being a poet, you have to be resourceful, and so I think the mentorship and the influence and the inspiration for whatever it is that you do, if it's in a competition mode and you feel like you need to bring your game up because of someone, or someone like Dwayne giving you an opportunity to present on a certain stage, or someone like Eddie hooking you up with the history behind what's happening. Every single person that we encounter should be an influence for us. Maybe not what to do as well. Lishai has influenced me greatly. So I mean, I think every relationship that we have as a poet, I think is absolutely essential in our growth, in our understanding. And also, I mean, we're talking about human interaction. Our stories are about communication of people, human stories. And so I think even outside of the world of this art form, being inspired by family members, from youth, from the work, from the job, people on the street, I think is absolutely essential in being able to sort of grasp that full umbrella. What it means to be a poet, I think it means to be influenced by everything all the time.
I'd say for myself, again, it's really going back a long ways, but last year I had the opportunity to teach and perform in Trinidad with Eddie Motion and Anthony Banksfield. And it was interesting because all of us have been in this for 20 years, and it was one of the first times when all four of us, five of us,
Yeah,
Our-
man, child.
and Manchild, well, we were all in the exact same space and could actually look back at everything that we've done and the whole history of how this stuff has evolved between Montreal, Ottawa, Toronto, the Word Life album that we put out, which is, you know, a piece of Canadian spoken word history that probably not even a lot of people in this room know of or have heard, but to so many years ago put out this compilation CD of poets from Ottawa, Montreal, like the coordination it took to do that, to have launches of the album in all of the cities. And the person who invited us to Trinidad, somebody just gave him the CD. And he didn't even realize that all of us were on this CD, but he booked all of us. And when we ended up in Trinidad, he realized that we were all on his favorite poetry CD that someone had given to him. So, I mean, so having stuff like that and knowing the history and living through the history and having, you know, colleagues who, you know, we could be like, hey, do you remember when? All this stuff long before I even started putting on slams, all of the stuff that we did prior to then. And then, you know, I've always been very much a lone wolf. I kind of just roll by myself, do my own thing. I'm an extremely introverted person. It's not like I don't. It's not that I don't like y'all.
Tell us more.
It's just I'm in my comfort zone when I'm just in my own little bubble, right? But that being said, I have a lot of love and gratitude for the poets who have acknowledged the things that I've done for them and the opportunities that I've created for them. A lot of times, you know, I do stuff and I don't feel like I'm thanked or recognized for the platforms that I've created that have allowed the scene to grow and develop in the way that it has. I mean, one example, last year I put Britta in When Sisters Speak for the first time, and you know, she brought me a little gift just to say, you know, thanks, I really appreciate this opportunity. And those kinds of things, like, you know, there would be times when, you know, Ian would just send me a message on BBM or whatever, just be like, yo, I really appreciated that. Those kinds of things, like when you work in isolation and you create for the betterment of other people, the acknowledgement it means a lot when you get it, and I always check for those people who actually respect and acknowledge the platforms that I created.
We love your voice.
Thanks, Reese.
Yeah. Hello. My next question is about when you'll be running for.
2014 elections coming up.
All right, you ready?
Oh.
Okay.
Get
Okay
rid of
then.
Route 4.
Yeah, right. So. I wonder when the key question is, you know, the real question I think is how do you do it? What's your secret? But we're kind of going to build towards that a bit. We're not just going to give it away, right? It's magic what you're doing. So my first question is, when was the first moment that you kind of saw it was possible to not just, you know, oh, I got paid, that was so nice, $50, $75, oh, I can eat today, but you really knew you could earn a living, and for some of you that may be different. I don't know if, I've met poets who just want to be able to pay their rent, and they're like, yes! You know, for me, I have some student debt. For other people, it's a family. I've seen you do a workshop with your baby in your arms, you know, so that's magic that you've worked to accomplish. So whatever your standard is personally in terms of how you earn a living, when was the first moment that you really said, hey, I can do this?
I graduated school in Ottawa for journalism, and I moved back to Calgary to work with the CBC, and I was doing stupid shit like New Year's Eve tonight. The elephants in the zoo, Calgary Zoo, are feeling down because of the fireworks noise. I was feeling a little unaccomplished. But during that time, there was also a Canadian Festival of Spoken Word happening, and I was on the Ottawa team. It was 2009. It was happening in Victoria. and we were fortunate enough to win that year. And they were taking the plane back to Ottawa, and it stopped in Calgary. I was going to get off in Calgary, but then I said no, and then continued on to Ottawa. And yeah, it was that moment that's like, oh, like this is like super cool. And if money, I don't know, this is personal. If money becomes the end goal, then that's what you will get. But the idea of fulfilling some sort of idea of self-purpose or just being happy with what you're doing in life, I think is also just as important, if not more important. And I think that once you put the energy there and super hard work, these things will come to you. Yeah, and that was the time for me. That was the decision time for me. And jobless, things have been going all right since.
I met Ian a year after he had made that decision to go full-time as a poet. And so that, for me, was like, wow, someone in my age demographic is just going for it, full-time as a poet. So for me, that was pretty big. And then being in touch with Dwayne and seeing that Dwayne actually has a house, has a car, supports his daughter, his family, just from being a poet, that was also greatly affirming that it can actually be done. And I was all over the place in university. I went from arts and science to philosophy to humanities to international development to business school, and then I became a poet. But I think I didn't just become a poet. I think that decision has been something that has been brewing inside of me for a long time, and I realized very soon, as soon as I discovered spoken word, I realized this is something that I can make a career out of, but I realized that I had to work up to it. Not just spiritually, emotionally, but also financially. So I've worked in the nonprofit sector, I've worked in the municipal political arena, I've worked corporate Bay Street, I had a gig down there, and I've just really made sure that when I do decide to make the decision to go full-time, I'm at a place where I have built up enough of a reputation that I have consistent gigs, that I know the funding landscape, that I know folks, and so that I can actually make a success out of it.
I think for myself, this year makes 21 years that I've been doing this full-time. And I started when I was in high school. I was producing events all through university. And,
I can just imagine that.
yeah. So, I knew pretty early in the game, because of the events that I was producing, because of how many people were coming out to the events, that this was something that I could do, but I knew it more so based on the event production side than, say, the poetry side. So then it was just really a matter of fusing those two things.
So whether it was 21 years ago or a long time coming, but kind of a recent 3 to 5 year decision, I'm wondering, what does the landscape look for you now? Because we want to get into some of the more nitty gritty around, how does touring work, how do grants work. The funding landscape is a great expression, Lishai, so I bet it looks different for each of you in terms of whether it's shows or doing workshops and working with organizations. I know that I'm a member of the League of Canadian Poets, and that a couple of poets that I've worked with recently, I want to say, hey, this is how you do it, So if there are organizations like Unity who've been a part of your story as well, that have been or are part of your landscape that could open up opportunities for people in this room, I'd like you to share a bit about what it's like for you and where you see opportunity for other poets. Big question.
So where we see opportunity for other poets?
Yeah, and where it is for you for now, so we get a sense, and where it is for other poets. Two-pronged.
I think being a spoken word artist, you have to be a very resourceful person, and you have to know that your income isn't just going to come from one source. If you are a writer and you have a publisher who publishes your book, you know that is going to be a big bulk of your income. But as a spoken word artist, I found that I have to be doing multiple things simultaneously. So at any given time, I'm working on 3 different projects. Some of them I'm getting paid for, some of them I'm not. But I always have at least one source of income coming in from at least one project that I'm working on. And you have to do, I'm finding that I have to do things like facilitating workshops, that's a big source of income, doing gigs, applying for grants, doing PSAs, and then also partnering with organizations. Like right now I'm working with the Schizophrenia Society of Ontario. And I just worked with Asian Arts Freedom Schools, like connecting with community organizations that are all around us, because they tend to have a little bit more of a budget than, let's say, a grassroots youth poetry movement. Whenever an organization tells you that they don't have it within their budget, always familiarize yourself with the word no. You don't have to take on a gig if the budget is not there to feed you, because as a poet, you can't pay your rent pro bono. You have to be okay with negotiating what your fee is, and then when the organization comes to you and asks you what your fee is, you have to be okay with saying no if that is not if that's not going to feed you. And I could go on a tangent about that, but I'll let the others speak before I get too far ahead of myself.
I think it's important to understand what your work looks like, what your work sounds like, how your work is received by an audience or people. It's not everyone that can work with non-government organizations. It's not every poet that can go into schools and present their work. And it's not every poet that wants to. It's not every poet that's made out for the touring life or traveling overseas. So I do think that finding out what your work is about and how it affects people and making it super good will sort of allow you to see, okay, this organization is in line with what I'm trying to do, or this this community, or this nightclub, or this agent, or this manager, or this festival. Really being able to focus on where your strengths lie, because you know there's a sea of artists out there, and you want to be able to squeeze through the cracks and really identify yourself as different, as something special, as something unique, as something artful. But only you will be able to sort of define what that is or what that looks like. February is a great month for Black poets because they're Black. Not everyone's Black. Yeah, I mean, you know, figure it out, right? Like there's, we have a friend, Buno Mohammed, who used to slam, and now he's just like doing the university circuit of like Muslim Students Association here, Muslim Students Association here, Muslim conference here, Muslim conference here, and like he's found whatever that is for him. And no one else is going to be able to tell that story the way that he tells it, and so he's been able to do that. Shane Khoisan, for instance, does a lot of festivals, a lot of public speaking gigs, but that's due to the work, right? You can't go up on stage and say, you know, fuck you, Harper, and expect to receive certain kinds of gigs. So it's about, I think, understanding your work and understanding what it does to an audience. And making it really great, I think, is really important.
I think I would echo everything that my co-panelists have shared, so I'm going to share some other tidbits. I think first, if you want to be a full-time spoken word artist, make sure your product is good. That is the first thing. You have to be constantly trying to get better at your craft. At all times, figuring out how do I make this better? How do I dig deeper into this thing that I'm doing? The problem, I mean, there's, as was expressed, there are good things and there are bad things with slam. The bad thing with slam is that you get this automatic, you know, feedback and love and adoration and, you know, a little bit of fame, and you think that you've made it, that these poems that you have are the best poems, but there's always deeper, there's always better, and you have to understand that everyone sitting around you in the room is fighting for the same $100 that you're trying to get. What's going to differentiate you from them? Well, you got to dig deeper and create better work all the time. You have to be trying to dig deeper and get better. The other thing is you have to have or gain or find humility. And in humility, you have to understand that you are only a small piece in this spoken word puzzle. A lot of times, you know, through slam things, we get these egos, and we've won a few slams, we've won a national championships, we think we're all that or whatever, and our relationship to spoken word is, what can I get out of it? If you want to create longevity, you must be thinking, what can I give to it? Because if you are not protecting the thing that is supposed to feed you, how long is it going to last? Your commitment has to be to making spoken word better, right? So every event that is going on that is of a certain quality or whatever, support it, make people support it. You have to weed out the stuff that's good from the stuff that, you know, is going to fade away. And you have to support those things, because at all times, if that platform disappears, you disappear. So your number one commitment has to be to, how do I protect, preserve this environment, right? It's one thing with slams, but you know, for showcases and those kinds of things, a lot of artists have to understand that when somebody books you for a show and they're going to pay whatever they're going to pay, even if it's $50, whatever, this person has made a commitment to you, that they believe in you enough to put you in this event, to give you whatever portion of money they can afford to give you. What is your responsibility to that person? I meet poets all the time who come to a showcase, they haven't told anybody about it, they roll up by themselves, they just expect to have an audience there. You are not that great. Practice humility, right? When you come, if somebody's paying you $150, you should roll with enough people to cover that $150. You want to tell the promoter of that show, I appreciate you so much for choosing me out of everybody else you could have chosen, that I'm going to support you by bringing out my people. Now, those people might really love the event, they might come to another one of that person's event, but that is how the whole scene grows. When you have this idea that you're so great that you're just going to roll up and people are going to be there just to hear you, it doesn't work like that. And you are a part of what is killing the thing that you claim to love, right? So we have to practice humility and humble ourselves and be like, hey, it's a give and take, right? This person's creating an opportunity for me, I need to do something for this person. And it works in that kind of way.
Before we move on to the next question, I just want to add a little bit to what Dwayne was talking about and a little bit to what Ian was talking about too. I think for me, I ask myself constantly, who am I? And that translates into what is my offering? So what I offer is definitely what feeds me, but it's also what feeds the community. And once you figure out who are you and what is your offering, what is your contribution, what is your purpose, what is your strategy to bring this purpose to life. And then I think you have to look at values as well, like what is the value of the work that you do. And for me, I struggle sometimes with negotiating what my value is and what others dictate my value is. And then also thinking about the stories that we tell ourselves about prosperity. So, I mean, one of the societal stories we tell ourselves about prosperity is you're only as valuable as the money you make. Mm-hmm. So redefining that based on my own set of values and what I think my value is. And then when people come at me and say, hey, this is what my budget is, if it's someone who I really, if it's someone who has helped me, if it's someone who has mentored me, who is someone who has helped me out, then of course, as a sign of gratitude, I will take the gig and I will do my best to, elevate that show. But if it's an organization that doesn't know you, that's like trying to, get a poet on board because it's mill hipster and they think it's gonna, make them look really good, and they say this is the budget that we have for you. You can either work with us or we'll find someone else that can replace you. That's when I think you have to familiarize yourself with the word no, because your value has to be based on what you have decided for yourself, and not what others will dictate to you. What do you think, Dwayne?
No, I think I agree with that. I think, as Lishai said, I'm in a situation where I own a house, I have a car, I have, a daughter that I have to provide for. And even with that said, I still turn down a whole lot of shows because I believe, in 20 years I've done enough to put myself in a certain place where I don't have to do certain things if I don't want to. And I leave those other gigs for people who are coming up. Those are gigs I might have taken 10 years ago or whatever. And some people, because, it's Dwayne Morgan, they want to try and put me, into certain things at a point that I don't necessarily think is fair. In some situations, I've had situations where I agreed to do certain shows for less money that they said they couldn't find, but they were not allowed to use my name in any of the publicity, because a lot of times people just want to be able to say, Dwayne Morgan's going to be here, because they think extra people will show up. And I'm just like, well, you can't use my name. Nothing can have my name on it. I'll show up and perform, but you cannot use my name. If I see my name anywhere attached to this event, then I'm not coming. It's a breach of our agreement, right? And in those situations, then it's like, all right, you're not going to use me for my name and what I've been able to do and not pay for it, right? Because you also have to understand, like for Ian, for those of us who've been in the game for a long time, who've done stuff, people aren't just paying you for the 15 minutes you spend on stage. They're paying you for the 5 years that you took to create that 15 minutes on stage. It's never about just that 15 minutes. It's always going to be about, so for me, it's about 21 years that it took to create that 15 minutes and the value that I place on that. And I rather turn down everything that isn't up to what I believe I'm worth than to do stuff that undermines, what I think my value is.
But you gotta do free shows when Mos Def has a line. How do you get ID with no ID? Because if I had ID, I wouldn't need ID.
Yeah.
And the same, I didn't make it, but
I like that line.
How do you get experience with no experience? How do you get gigs with no gigs? How do you get the grants with no grants? How do you do that? And it's really like our good friend Aubrey says, start from the bottom. And for sure, there's like you got to do the free shows, but at a certain point, then you realize that you don't have to do the free shows anymore. And it's a balance. It's based on where you want to go and what you want to do, right? Still to this day, I'm sure that that many of us will accept, right? The budget is not just like financial. The budget is also what kind of show is it? Who's going to be there? Who's been there in the past? How is this going to help me as an artist, as well as sharing the platform and the art as well? So I mean, it's a balance often.
I would say, I would also jump on that and say, I still do a lot of free shows, but now I do the free shows that I want to do, that speak to me in some kind of way. If it's an issue that I'm passionate about in some kind of way, then I'll do that. But I always tell people, just like what Ian was saying, it's like the easiest way to make money off of spoken word is to start performing for free. Every time you perform, you're auditioning, you have no idea who's in the audience watching you, who's going to book you for something, and whether I'm doing a free show or I'm doing a show for hundreds of people and getting lots of money, it's the same performance every time. You have to have a personal standard for yourself, which means if you accept to do it, you're going to come and you're going to execute at your level. And you have no idea who might be there looking for someone to book, and that might be your night that opens you up to a whole bunch of other things. So even to this day, I still do a lot of free gigs because it's necessary to be in front of certain people or certain audiences that you think might further whatever your own personal vision is.
I just had a question. Is it possible to still do a free show and get paid in the sense because you have product? And
Absolutely.
Yeah, but the problem with that is that I've had people approach me and say, well, we can't pay you, you know, you can perform for free, but we'll let you sell your books and CDs. I'm like, well, can you guarantee how many of these are going to sell? Because, I mean, if you can't guarantee how much I'm going to make off of the books and CDs, what if nobody buys a book or CD? I mean, that's great that I can set them up, but what if nobody's here? You know what I mean? So then that's the other side to that as well.
And I think it's also the way that you're communicating as well. When you say, I mean, I'm sure we've all been in situations where we've taken on gigs where we don't feel like it's particularly aligned with our own integrity, we don't feel like we're getting back what we're giving. And I think it comes down to what are we telling other people when we undervalue the work that we do? And like, how is it bringing down the community when we take on work that is not good for us, that is not good for what spoken word is as a whole?
To build off of, we're kind of going into some of the difficulties that we face in terms of making really difficult decisions. I'm wondering what your perspective is on maybe a really challenging moment that you came across, and how that relates also to anything you want to say about, you know, what the hustle is really like in terms of negotiating contracts, like having those tough conversations, asking the right questions, or learning from a moment where you did not ask the right question in terms of, you know, invoicing, actually getting paid, the organization disappears, you know. It's kind of a, like, what's the worst case scenario that you faced question, and what did you learn from that so that some of the people in the room don't have to?
I think giving yourself a number, a real number based on the past, based on your resume, a realistic number. Perhaps you can ask around, what's your going rate? If you're friends with them, you know, some people might not be willing to share that information. I remember a few cases working with like bigger organizations or government groups, and you let them give you a number, and then you're like, oh, that's the most money I've ever seen ever. That's awesome. Go to show that like you probably could have pushed it much higher, and that always sucks. I mean, knowing that you sort of undervalued yourself and that they overvalued you, so you have to like push up your value. So I mean, I think it's important to like set a standard for yourself, and work with that, and keep, you know, keep as true to it as you can. I know poets that have a certain standard for like a 25-30 minute set, and the negotiation goes, well, I can do 15 minutes for half of that, right? So they base it off of the time, but the ratio is still there. I know in paintings they do it like by the square foot. So
one of the lessons that I learned was a while ago when I was coming at people, like when people would approach me, I would tell them what my rate was. And then I got approached by Skills for Change partnered with CIBC, and they were doing this big event, and they asked me what my rate was, and then I told them $500. They didn't blink an eye, they're like, no problem. And kind of like what you said, I was like, wow, why did I tell them what my rate was? Why didn't I wait for them to make an offer? And it probably would have been much more than $500 because, you know, they got money. So for me now, I'm a little bit more cautious with telling people what my rate is before I know exactly what budget they have to work with.
I'm not too sure. I mean, I've had situations where, you know, people just didn't have the money, you know, that was agreed upon, you know, based on how the event went and that sort of thing. And I mean, you could chase people forever, you can, you know, run people down or whatever, but I mean, at the end of the day, for me, it's not necessarily about money, it's about, you know, principle and these kinds of things, but, you know, sometimes you just cut your losses and let certain things go and just, you know, keep it moving. You know that you're never going to do anything with that particular person or organization again. But, you know, you can't necessarily invest all of your energy necessarily in, you know, chasing something down, especially in a situation where, you know, I saw that, you know, the event did not go how this person thought it was going to go, and they still gave me, you know, something, right? that it wasn't like I'm gonna try to squeeze them for everything that we agreed on. It's like, hey man, I understand how this goes, because I produce events. Not every event goes how you want it to go. That's just the nature of the game. And if you're lucky, you have people that are in the events that you're working with who totally understand and be like, all right, cool. And if you can, you get them the next time.
Add something to that. I just think
Sometimes it happens, and it's like you can invest all of your energy in chasing this person for money that doesn't exist, or you can cut your losses and be like, you know what, I am never going to see that money. Let me just keep it moving.
Right.
And no, if this person ever dares reach out to me again, it's just not happening. You know what I mean? So I totally agree with that.
Here's a funny question. Let me tell you where it comes from. I got to do some workshops with spoken word in health classes, actually, with a couple of teacher friends. And so we did this exercise where students could write anything they wanted, a question, put it in a box, and I was answering it. We were dealing with substance use and abuse, mental health issues, healthy relationships, sexuality, the whole gamut. So all sorts of questions came up, and I used spoken word, so they also asked me questions about being an artist. One of which, it came up in 3 out of 4 classes. They were interested in how old I was. That was the 4 out of 4. This was the 3 out of 3 question. So I'm going to put it to you, but it's a question that poets get asked outside of that context. Taylor Molly has a poem about it. That's why I think it's it's at least a small elephant in the room. I think you've addressed some of the other ones. So the question is, how much do you make? You can answer it however inadvertently, or like Taylor Molly does, tell me to fuck off. Answer it however you choose to, whether you want to or not. But I think it's an insightful question because when we're talking about setting standards and rates for ourselves, we've thrown out some numbers around, starting at $50 or $75. Even if you're being paid that much, that's kind of where you start. $200, $500, you get paid that for a gig at some level. And the poverty line is, at a certain place, when you add up all of those numbers over the course of a year, we're talking, I don't know exactly, 10,000, 12,000, it's somewhere there. And I can confess that I struggled to answer that question in that classroom relative to the poverty line and what that means for our community. If we set our standard at a lower, you kind of alluded to this, level, then at a higher level, what does that mean? So, there might be a note if you want to answer it that way.
So, a couple years ago, I got with an accountant and sort of fixed up all my shit. And she was like, what the fuck? But she was like, it's in Greektown. I'm sure she works for some mob bosses or something. That's She was like, yo, listen, this is what you do. You're an artist, so there's a tax write-off for this, there's a tax write-off for that, and you can write off a lot of stuff. Also there's subsidies, and there's a different bracket that which your income is taken in as. The numbers are hard. On paper, it's much less than it actually is, because a lot of things are cash transactions, which is great for taxes. But when I was looking at it last year, it was better than I would have done maintaining my job as a full-time journalist, if that makes any sense.
Yeah. Can we be bold and ask for a number, or that's such a ballsy question?
The problem with me giving a specific number is because it's not real, right? So if I make 5G from a gig, that's great, but I'm putting 3G into another project, or I'm paying musicians for something, right? Yeah. So it's kind of not real, but
But what you're saying is if you make a full-time income, I can live off this and not just pay my rent, but buy groceries.
But the thing is, I can, Dwayne can. It's totally up to that individual. How deep they want to go. I know some very, very, very incredible poets who are probably in the red, right? Yeah. And some really, really, really shitty poets who are making lots of money.
How do I get to be one of those?
Yeah, I think it's a lot to do with managing your money, knowing how to manage your money. Like Ian, I saw an accountant a couple of years ago, and then when I made the recent transition from my last place of employment into full-time poetry, I saw another accountant, and I just make sure that I'm on top of my shit. So it's not so much about how much money you make, it's how you spend it. And Trey Anthony recently, she told me, you make a budget for the year and then work backwards with that. Think about the ideal number that you want to make that year, and then start making paths towards that big amount.
And I don't know, I guess it depends on the year, really. I mean, some years there's more stuff going on, some years there aren't, but generally with myself, there's a range between 75 and 100.
Thank you for actually saying.
That's a fair answer.
I appreciate it.
But it doesn't mean, like, it doesn't mean anything, right? Like,
But it does, though.
It does, but like, so like 21 years of being on the scene and filling up the St. Lawrence Center with 900 people, that the number doesn't speak to anything like that, and it can't. And so like the personal path, like the poet's path, is a very, very, very personal one. So the numbers, like, and you know, it depends, right? Like, what do you have to take care of in your life? What is the fire under your feet that will push you in that direction? So Dwayne's path is very different from Ian's, is very different from Lishai's, very different from Shane Koizan, C.R. Avery's. Each one of these people are doing very, very different things, and the numbers are totally different. So it's about what do you need to do, right? And so it's right, like Dwayne's putting on shows, and if that's what you want to do because of some sort of financial capital, then that becomes like, do we have the I can't do that. Right? And so my income has to come from different ways, and different things that are very specific to myself. Yeah.
I mean, Dwayne has found what he is. Besides being an exceptional poet, there was no one like him in the city that can put on a spoken word event like he does. Ian has toured extensively. I know, personally, I don't like touring. I'm a homebody. I like my own bed. But I'm really good at youth work. I'm really, really good at that. So it's finding what you're really good at and finding the best way to have that pay your bills and feed your soul at the same time.
One point that I think most of you said on the panel is basically, as a poet or as an artist, no matter what you're making, you're reinvesting that money in yourself and your projects, right? Because whether you get a grant or not, you might go ahead with that project. So like these things are continuously evolving, and whatever it is that you earn, you're putting back into your work.
I see it like the stock market, you know, like how the rich get richer, and time has shown that like the artists that just keep on going and keep on like exceeding their personal best are the ones that will be succeeding. I mean, you know, the numbers for Brothers Speak was, you know, one of the biggest that you've done thus far. And I mean, that's just a testament to show that, okay, like it keeps on moving, it keeps on going.
Barbara, what did you want to say?
I was actually, you answered the question, which was like, I think it's really important to like realize that like every person's gonna have something that they're bringing to the scene that's really unique and individual. And I think for somebody who's new and like trying to discover that and figure it out, it's great to hear what different people do, and like, and that you do tour. Because that was my question, was like, okay, so what is it, like what is the place that you found that really feeds you, but where you do have something to offer to the community that you offer uniquely in a way that nobody else is going to offer in the same way. So I think you already answered it. It's super helpful. If you have any other ideas on that, like how you discovered that, what it is that you offer. Was it just by trial and error, like trying to do different things? Like I myself did a couple workshops in different youth settings in the last
year, I guess, and though those have paid okay, like I've walked away from those being like, okay, so I don't necessarily want to do that exactly, but here's that piece of it and that piece of it that like really worked with my training in psychotherapy and pastoral counseling, and like here's how I want to reinvent that in doing like groups around trauma and writing or whatever else, you know? So maybe like what was your process to discover that niche or that place, or where like your offering and your desire met the needs of the scene and the needs of communities around you?
I don't know, I guess it's trial and error. I mean, for me, I've done all of it and probably still do all of it. So, I mean, ever since my daughter was born, I don't really tour anymore the way that I did. But, I mean, I've done the touring, the books and CDs, I do the workshops, I produce events, I perform. So I still pretty much do all of the elements, and I love all of the elements because they feed me in different kind of ways and you know, speak to a different part of who I am. But again, I think, you know, there are probably some parts that I like more than others. I guess for everybody, you just try a bunch of stuff and just kind of see what fits best.
I think it's being open to whatever opportunities come your way, and commitment to learning. For me, I'm constantly learning about myself. Like, this is my whole project, like, know thyself. So I'm always doing as much as I can to learn. I mean, I just came back from an international residency. I'm in a Toronto-based residency right now. Lord knows, you know, being mentored by Dwayne was a residency in and of itself. Like, I'm constantly learning, and when I invest in myself, I feel like that somehow translates into the things that are offered to me. Almost like, you know, when you trust in your own, when you trust in the force of your own potential, the universe does provide. The universe starts aligning.
Yeah. Thanks.
I have a couple more questions, but I think I've asked a pretty wide variety, so why don't we open it up to even more variety and see how we go from there.
I was talking to an American poet recently who was pretty surprised that a lot of Canadian poets don't make money by doing university gigs. He makes maybe 80% of his money, he said, just doing university, colleges, Frosh Week, festivals that universities have, and he says they pay a lot in the US, and he was just shocked that he couldn't, you know, get a gig within like 2 weeks at like U of T or something like that. And so maybe just speak a bit about post-secondary gigs and how you can get into the SAC groups at Ryerson, U of T York, or beyond GTA, and if that even is worth it. Like, are even universities looking for poets? Because they seem to be focused on music a lot for Frosh Week and magicians and comedians. Or do you think there's an opportunity there if you know someone, I guess, or you got in somehow?
One of the, like, just most people, there's like about 8,000 people at Frosh Week Waterloo, UWO, and no, Western. And yeah, it was a shit show, but they got me to host and do some poems, and it was a really weird vibe. I mean, like, it's tough to do more than 1 or 2 pieces and really like have that connection. So I think that's part of it. Why the university circuit isn't really looking for that kind of thing. They pay very well, but things such as like almost like the TED Talks, like conferences and things that they have within the schools in the university, as opposed to like the student union of the university hiring a poet, but like the English Society or the leadership conference, etc. These are definitely places to look at within the schools.
My experience thus far has been that I find that a lot of educational institutes, they hire poets from the US. So Ryerson, for example, for the second year, in a row I'm going to be presenting with them. And the headliners are Watson Sheeran from England and Sonia Sanchez, which is phenomenally amazing, and I think it's going to really enrich the spoken word. I mean, it's always enriching when you hear spoken word from outside of your community, but I don't find that here in Canada we give as much of that spotlight to our own poets within the country, which is problematic, but that's just my experience thus far.
I was going to share the same thing, so.
Well, but do you think there is opportunity for poets in Toronto, or do you think it's just a waste of time to try to bug universities at this point for you?
I mean, I've done a number of university gigs, and I mean, I think part of it also comes down to you have to have enough material to do a lengthy enough show. A lot of Toronto artists don't have professional pictures, don't have a professional bio, don't have a press kit. We don't have any. You don't even have anything to package and submit to be taken seriously. So that's another part of it. Like, we just think, oh yeah, I'm just going to do some poetry, and who cares? Like, you're now competing against everybody who has taken the time to take professional pictures, to package their stuff properly, to website, all of this stuff, so that when you present it, people are like, oh, this person is serious. Like, there aren't a lot of people that I've met in the scene in Toronto who are serious. Because if you ask them for this stuff, they don't have it. I ask poets all the time, all right, send me some pictures for the flyer. And the stuff they send me is like stuff from a cell phone like 8 years ago. What is this? Like, you're not serious. Like, you need to take your stuff serious and put it together in a way where it looks like you're somebody, for somebody to take notice. And a lot of us just don't do that.
So maybe the American poets need to do that a bit more.
Well, they do it, and they have booking agents that work directly with the networks of universities on both sides of the border. So, I mean, one booking agent might represent 20 poets and just sends all 20 packages out and sees which schools take on who, right? But we don't have a booking agency in Toronto, or I don't even think in Canada, that deals with spoken word. Most people that I know of across the country have no real concept of what spoken word is, which makes it hard for you even to set up tours and all of these kinds of things, because people might love what you do, but they're like, I don't know how to package this. Like, I don't know how to sell this to a bar. I don't know who to team you up with. Like, it's dope. I see it. I get it. But I don't know how I would make bar owners and people get it and to make it work. Right? So there's a lot of work we have to do. But again, one of my critiques here, even with the CFSW and stuff, is that we're so focused in the wrong places. Like, so we're focused on the CFSW, but we haven't created an infrastructure that allows poets to tour. That's backwards, right? Who cares about this one event when you can't do anything else the rest of the year? Work on the whole year, and the festival will take care of itself, right? But we're so focused on this 1 week in Victoria that what are you going to do for the rest of the 11 months?
Fundraise. Get there.
Right? But so our focus is constantly in the wrong place.
I really like how you talked about building your own brand and creating your press kit and doing all that stuff, because I may not be a poet, but as a b-boy I understand the need to present yourself in a certain professional manner to try to get your gigs. Now, that being said, once you have that done, once you have all that ready, where do you take it? Like, you talked about what do you do with your grants, and you talked about trying to get yourself into places, but how do you go about getting those grants? Where are the connections you can find? You guys have connections. We don't know how to get the connections.
Well, I mean, grants, all the grants have websites. So, I mean, that stuff is there. Toronto Arts Council, Ontario Arts Council, Canada Council for the Arts. But aside from that, look at your material, right? Look at your repertoire and see what threads run through your material, because that will tell you what kinds of places might be interested in your work. And I mean, just like back in the day with, salespeople making cold calls, I mean, you have email. You just send an email, be like, hey, I'm so-and-so, here's my press kit. You might never hear from them. You might hear from them 5 years from now. They might just hold on to it. But just send it out. It doesn't hurt. You
And
know what I mean?
that goes in with knowing yourself too, right? Because you have to take the time to discover what you're good at.
Yeah, so you figure it out and you just send it. I mean, I'm forever just sending stuff and seeing if anyone's interested. If no one's interested, just keep it moving, work on the next thing. I come up with another idea, I just send it out and see, okay, does this work or whatever. That's it, you know, if no one's interested, no one's interested. But you have to just keep pushing and trying to find whatever. I mean, you might already know people who might open doors for you and you might never even think that that person could open a door because we don't know who somebody else knows, right? So, I mean, it's really just looking at the space that you're in, the people who are around you, and putting yourself out there.
Alyssa, Andre, Vanessa. Great. Andre, Vanessa.
Hi guys, this is a two-parter. Because I've been checking notes. So it's interesting to think that how a person promotes themselves as a spoken word artist is by basing themselves with a fan base. Now, how do you do so outside of the spoken word community? Lord knows that the spoken word community is so like embracing and warm enough to like your Facebook page or go to your Instagram or many of those different platforms, but how as an individual artist do you use those methods to capitalize on your ability to promote your own ideas as a poet that wouldn't kind of separate you from everyone else and get you that larger audience that would get you gigs outside of, well, I know this poet that I've worked with or that I've competed against. So that's the first one.
Okay, well, I think the, you know, when I was coming up, you know, we had dial-up internet. And we didn't really have all the stuff that exists right now. I think social media is a great platform for putting things out, videos, poem links. I meet poets all the time who, you know, they don't want to post their poems online. I'm like, who do you think you are and your poem is? Like, who cares, right? I post poems all the time, and people like them, they share them, and every time they like and share them, I'm gaining new audience, every single time. But we're just like, oh no, I'm not going to share this. Like, what do you think's going to happen to your poem? Like, I've had a poem where somebody took it and was performing it as their own and eventually got called out on it. But if that happens, that is so rare. The likelihood of that is so rare that just put your stuff out there and have people have access to it and let your fan base work for you, right? So they will see it, they will read it, they'll be like, hey, you have to see this new poem that Andre wrote. Share it with this person. They'll put it up on their Facebook page. They'll tag different people. All of those people are coming right back to you. And you have to figure out how are you going to grab those people and pull them into whatever it is that you're doing.
So which mechanism you found was more successful for your pursuit of that end task? Like getting everyone like that is new to your Facebook page to bring them in closer beyond that one poem that initially instigated their curiosity to your name?
Well, one of the things that I try to do with my Facebook page is make connections with people and have conversations with people. So I'll do like every Tuesday I have a question of the week. I put up a question, people respond, I always respond back to whatever people say, because it's one thing for me as a promoter, but I don't want to be promoting all the time. I don't want people to think that my only interest in them is to sell them something or to get them to the next event. So for me, because I'm always inviting people to stuff, I also want people to know that I'm actually genuinely interested in how they think about certain things and what things they care about, because then that might inform what new events I come up with, what poems I'm going to start writing about, and different things. So I'm very much engaged with the fan base, right? So it's not a matter of me just putting stuff out and wanting everyone to come to me. When they come to me, what am I going to do to keep them here? And to keep them there, I have to show genuine interest in them, right? One of the things for me that I do is, you know, I always try to remember the faces of the people who come to my events. I try to remember names of people who email me and stuff. So even when I'm doing a show like When Sisters Speak on Saturday, I'll go through my Facebook list and I'll send a personal invite. Even though I've sent the big group blast, I'll send a personal invite and say, hey, how are you? I have One Sister Speak coming up. I remember seeing you at One Brother Speak. If you can, come out to this show. And the people love the fact that A, you remembered them, that you gave them something personal, because right now we're also living in a time where people are so inundated with media that is mass, that if you can move away from mass and get back to personal, people will respond to it better because they see that you're going that extra mile, that they actually mean something and have value to you. And part of my work and my passion is trying to make people valuable. You know, when I worked with Lishai, even though I've made her cry on several occasions, my thing has always been, I see value in her and I want her to see what I see. So my thing is, what do I have to do with her to get her to see that value that I see? So part of my passion in my work is empowering people and showing them that I value them, and that's part, it's part of my marketing, but it's part of who I am.
Eloquent. Ian.
I think that I hate Facebook, I hate Twitter, I hate all that shit. I think there's so much ego involved with it, but I think as an artist, it's a very important platform, and I think that as an artist, we have to remember that we're artists at all times using these platforms. So everything from what picture is up, what picture is your profile picture, what picture is your cover photo, what are you saying? What are you posting? What are you retweeting? All of these things are the personality of the artist, and we see these things all the time. So I know when someone's going through a breakup. I know what someone had for dinner, and it's like, but I appreciate you for your art, not for like the sushi that you had last week. So it just depends on what kind of personality you're trying to present as an artist. But remember that people are always watching. I personally, I don't do the I won't write a poem and put it out. But that's my own personality online. So what I'll do is I'll take a long time. I'll produce something super cool and then put it out. It gets a lot of reshares. It gets then you're seeing hundreds of likes there. Then you're getting shares from people who say, hey, check this out. People that you're not friends with on Facebook. But that's just my style. If I'm gonna write a status, I've thought about it. It's gonna be poetic. It's gonna have reshareable qualities because that I'm an artist online, right? So I think it's important to distinguish your personal self from your artist self online. And if you don't want to separate those two in terms of Facebook accounts, Twitter accounts, then you have to remember that you are the same person there all the time. And then you have to ask why. Why do I have a Facebook account? What is it for? Why do I need more followers on Twitter? Why do I need this many likes? Why do I need this many views? Why? What is the goal for that? And then you'll be more prepared to create work that fits that model and the frequency at which you post things, the types of things that you say, the articles that you retweet, hey guys, this is cool, that tells us about who you are. The comments that you write on other people's notes, if you're getting involved in a Facebook battle on some slam shit, people see that, people recognize that, people notice that.
I want to say something that kind of adds on to what Dwayne said a little bit about personal relationships, but I want to go off camera. Is that cool? Can we go off camera?
The question is because I've been doing this for 5 years, very much within the infancy of any kind of career. But when I first started, you guys were the unattainable giants. You guys were the Mount Rushmore, and I was a simple tourist holding a camera trying to, based on the reputations you guys had built for yourself. But now, as I've been doing this for 5 years, I understand you respectively as Cancer, Capricorn, and Libra. There's been this rapport that develops, which makes me think that beyond your professional stance, are you guys career opportunists, or has this been fate all along? And you guys have known yourself well enough to understand the emotional markers in which you would grow from, and the ones that you would shrink if you'd not capitalized on. Because most people could attest success to any kind of monetary gain that is known, of course. But as individuals, is this something you knew would happen? That some point down the line, there would be a bar filled with people looking at you going, what are your secrets, please?
I love you.
And it is not of the money factor, but the personal conviction it takes to undergo such an uncertain career choice as not only poet, but teacher. Without union, without health benefits, without any kind of safety net. What propelled you to undergo this kind of challenge with such conviction that there you are right now?
Great question.
That's a good. He must be a poet.
I would say for me, there was absolutely never a thought that this would be possible. One, being an introvert, I never thought I would do anything that required me to be in front of people.
Right.
And then two, in the time when I started out, there wasn't all of this stuff. So there wasn't, you could go to Toronto Poetry Slam, then go to Roots Lounge, then go to Mississauga, then none of that existed, right? Their open mics were a fictitious thing that happened with like, shirt and tie and like vests with like stuff on the patches, right? Like we didn't go to nothing like that. Like it wasn't a part of our reality. And I realized the poet I mentioned before, Black Cat, he was gonna leave the country to pursue some other things, and he invited me to perform in his very last show, and that show was very much like a passing of the baton, because as soon as he ended, I started producing events to fill that void. And I think it comes back to one, humility, and in understanding that through my work, I bring people together in a way that they would otherwise never come together in. And I see myself as serving people in that kind of way, in bringing them together to have those kinds of experiences. And the reason why I work as hard as I do is because there is no safety net. It's because I always tell people, if I don't work, I don't eat. And I love to eat. And then at the end of the day, you can eat hot dogs or you can eat steak. I enjoy steak. So I work to afford the steak, right? Nothing against anybody who works for the hot dog. If that's what you want, do that, right? But for my standards, it's steak, right? And I get up every morning and I have this little daughter and she looks at me and she doesn't care what I have to do. She knows if she's hungry, she wants to be able to open the fridge and find food in it. That is my responsibility to make sure that it's there. That is my incentive to get up every morning with no safety net and do whatever it takes to create opportunities for myself so that I can make sure that every time she opens the fridge, there's something there that she can eat. And that's how I would answer it.
I think, Andre, because you know I am a Cancer, I'm a hyper-sensitive person. Dwayne mentioned that he's made me cry. Doesn't take a lot to make me cry. I'm a very sensitive person, and I think there's only so much you can run away from your own purpose. And for me, I think my purpose has always been to be a storyteller. But I ran away from it for a really long time. But there's only so much you can run away from yourself, So, you asked whether it was fate, like what it is that has brought us here to this moment. For me, it was just clarity, reading signs around me, and being okay with who I am, and embracing that. Embracing that, yes, this doesn't come with a safety package, it doesn't come with health benefits, it doesn't come with dental, but it is what I need to do because it is who I am.
We have such limited time on this planet, and I wonder sometimes, I'm from Calgary, you're from Calgary. I mean, you know what it is back there.
Tumbleweeds and -50.
Right? And and people who have accepted the ideal that ruining the planet for the sake of an ideal that was told to them in terms of what success means is where they want to go from. I don't know like what happened in my genetic code that allowed me to not fall into that trap or whatever. People enjoy it. All I'm saying is that I would be very unhappy doing something else. But I also feel like there's a bigger purpose, and I want to be able to contribute to us as a species, the longevity of us as a species, and I believe that the only way to do that is through love, and I believe that communicating with each other is one of the highest forms of love, and this is the best way that I've found to communicate that love. So I just feel like I'm doing like a public service the best way that I can. I think it's a combination of like right timing, hard work, past experience, all brought us here. I mean, all of us here today at this moment. But it's also about choices. Once we make a choice to do something, what is it? If you love something so much that you're willing to give your everything to it, it will work out for you. I believe this. If you love it so much that you're willing to sacrifice everything, that you're willing to give it your everything, and that just doesn't mean like, stressing yourself to writing a metaphor. This means like, okay, it's not working for me just writing poems. Who do I need to contact? Who do I need to get in touch with? What do I need to write? Where do I need to go? Where do I need to look in order to make this happen? I mean, we see movies like this all the time, like Pursuit of Happiness, like dudes walking around selling like defibrillators or something, and it's like the world is telling you no, but you have no plan B. There is no other existence for you on this planet, and so you make it happen, or you don't make it happen, or you're miserable. I choose not to be miserable.
Good call.
I think to add to what Ian was saying too, when you speak about giving your all to something, that also requires a certain amount of honesty. Sometimes, we will cheat and say, this is my all, when you know it's not your all and you're wondering why something isn't working out for you, and it's because you're lying to yourself. Like you're not giving your all to the thing. So you have to be honest enough to know, do I really want this thing? Do I really love this thing? I mean, I could work less and have more free time if I just took a job somewhere. But I work 12 hours a day on me and on creating opportunities for other people, creating shows that people will come to and be like, oh, that was really cool. Like the whole Last Poet Standing, shameless plug. And also, never be afraid of shameless plugs. What's worse is not having anything to plug, right? That's what you should be ashamed of, right? If you're an artist, always have something that you can plug. You got to be working, right? So, but even for an event like the Last Poet Standing, the excitement that I saw on people's faces when they walked into this venue and see a boxing ring in the middle of the venue, thinking outside of the box, doing things that are different, that are creative, that other people aren't already doing. You have to find your niche and then go out there and put your stamp on it, put everything you have into it, right? But you have to be honest with yourself, because you can lie, you can say whatever, but you're always going to know the truth.
And you, sorry, go ahead.
I just recalled something that Dwayne told me a while ago, and I hope you don't mind that I'm sharing this, but Dwayne was telling me about what he would do to promote When Sisters Speak. And I think you talked about one year you would stand outside the clubs on Richmond Street West after hours, handing out flyers. And that made me realize that I need to ask myself, what am I willing to do to be successful? So am I willing to stand outside Richmond Street West handing out flyers? Probably not. That's not where, producing events is not where I'm particularly gifted at, But I think it's asking the question, what am I willing to do? How much am I willing to invest, and how much am I willing to sacrifice?
I read a quote in a book once, and they asked the artist, what do you do when you're not inspired? And he's like, not inspired, you know? Like, I wake up every morning and I'm inspired. Like, my job is to be inspired, right? So you're waking up, you're right? Like, you're working 9 to 5, or you're working longer than 9 to 5. Like, you're making sure that you're not wasting time. We have this idea sometimes that the artist, like, has a lot of time, and that, you know, like, we could wake up whenever we want and go to bed whenever we want. But like, if you have a regimented activity, if you treat it as though it's your career, as though your survival depends on it, you're gonna wake up first thing in the morning, you know, with the Blue Jays. And you're gonna work, whatever that is. If that's waking up to write a poem, if that's waking up to research residencies, if that's waking up to watch poems online, whatever it is, just use those hours and really get into it.
I think.
Nice. Jinx.
No, I was just gonna say, going back to the whole honesty and the drive and the determination and wanting something. I mean, I always tell the story when I was first starting out, because there weren't any open mics and I was really trying to figure out how to do this and to do this in a way where I could, you know, reach out to places in the States and different things. I had this part-time job and I would finish work at like 4 o'clock, drive to Detroit, perform at the open mic, drive back, be at work the next morning, and I would do that no problem. And then I built up a following in Detroit and in Toronto. Then when I wanted to start, you know, traveling, those people in Detroit were able to hook me up with places in other cities where I could perform. And then before long, I had my own little circuit that I had created where I could go and perform, simply because I did what everybody else thought was crazy, right? And I left and drove by myself week after week, going to Detroit to perform and building a name for myself, right? So how badly do you want it, right? That's what it comes down to. What are you willing to do that everyone else isn't willing to do? And that's how I got here, because I was always willing to take the risk to do things that other people said, yo, that don't make no sense. Because I wasn't getting paid, I wasn't a feature, I wasn't anything like that. It was just going for the chance to be there, to meet people, and to say one poem on stage. Drove 4.5 hours to say one poem, right? But
dude,
that led me. What was that?
I've known you for a very long time, but it's just that story makes me even more impressed with you.
I got story for days. People don't even know what I did to get into this position that I'm in now. But it's like, but it comes down to how badly do you want it, and that's how badly I wanted it, where I was willing to make that kind of a sacrifice week after week to build a name for myself, right? And so, you know, when people see, when I said before that when people book me, it's not just the 15 minutes, it's my gas to get to Detroit. You got to pay me for the gas I had to take to get to Detroit to build who I became as a result of that sacrifice, right? And that, all of that goes into how much I would negotiate and charge for me to be at a particular event.
Not all of us pull 12-hour days, but when we do, I think most people who've worked a long day can attest that it can be physically, mentally, sometimes emotionally exhausting. And I think being a freelance full-time artist, you have to know how to build in a practice of, like a creative practice, and then also a practice of self-care. So this is something that I'm learning recently, and I just wanted to share it as a tip, that it's not just about the art that you're pushing, it's who you are, because your art is an extension of who you are. So eating right, sleeping enough, you know, having a practice of, like, I wake up, I meditate, I do yoga, I write. You know, that's, if I don't have to be at a school early morning, then that is the practice that I always try and maintain, because it keeps me grounded enough to create the art. The art is a byproduct of how you are looking after yourself, in my opinion. So if you're out of balance, your art is going to be out of balance. So if you are a full-time artist, I highly recommend having a regular practice that keeps you grounded.
So I'm going to ask quick, for a burning question, because we said Vanessa could ask a question. We are speaking to waking up to a late hour when we want to wrap up. So Vanessa, is there a burning question in the room?
Yes,
Oh,
it's been burning for a while.
Okay.
I want some practical information from all three of you. What is in the press kit that you send out right now?
Smart move.
So, once again, take a look at your work. Decide what threads.
No, I'm asking you.
Me personally.
Yeah.
I have so I have a print press kit which I can take around and like you can hold and look through. So that has pictures, that has bio, that has resume, that has some highlights of the places that I performed, some numbers for people who care about that, grants, awards, things like that. But it's got to look cool, and it's got to speak to it, and it speaks to whatever my personality is. And then the digital one has like embedded video. It has embedded like audio tracks. It has pictures. It has links to website. It has sometimes reference letters, things like that.
I can show you mine after if you actually really want to see it, but it has pictures.
Oh, it's beautiful.
Bio, it has my publishing history, it has awards that I've won, festivals that I've been in, newspaper clippings, everything is there. So everything that pretty much I've done, achieved throughout my career is here. You know, a lot of times you really want documentation to prove that some of the things existed. So if there are flyers that have your name on it, newspaper clippings, like all those kinds of things are very important.
So you have a print, like a touchable version as well as like Ian does, or no?
I have a printed, colored version of this, which is like a little book that I can put in the mail and send out. I usually opt for the digital version because it's much cheaper, but some people want the physical version, and you know, I'll spend the money and create it and do it nicely. But if you want to see it further, I can show it to you.
Is there still a lot of people looking for like physical press kits, or it's kind of been phased out?
So it's like, so they have these certain like conferences. So there's like, for example, like the Folk Alliance conference where like the directors of each of the folk festivals in Canada come together to come see work. At that point, you know, it's better than a business card because they can see some things.
Yeah.
For the most part, online is probably that.
Mine has pretty much the same thing as what Ian said, except I focused on testimonials because of that personal connection that I think gets me a lot of gigs. So a lot of every time I go to a school, I'll try and get a testimonial from a teacher. It's also really important to archive any experiences that you have, always organization, the date, and just for your own purposes and for any grants that you apply for, it's good to put on your CV. So yeah, testimonials and then also numbers as well. So it sounds good sometimes when you're like, I've been in X amount of schools, I've been in X amount of festivals, that kind of stuff.
Do you want to ask both questions that are burning? And then we'll have one more chance for each of the artists to say anything that they wanted to say that you haven't had a chance to say, and respond to some combination of the questions.
First question might not be the nicest question, but I'm just curious what your opinion is on whether or not there's like a limit to how many full-time spoken word poets there can really be.
I think Dwayne should answer this question.
Yeah, that's a good
Well, I'm curious from
Let's
Dwayne's perspective and from
all
yours,
the-
and then I have another question that's related to something else we're talking about.
Can you throw it out at the same time so we've got all the questions on the table? We
Also, I mean, Dwayne, I don't know that this would apply to you because you've been doing it for a long time, but we were touching upon, you know, the issue of like colleges, universities, getting yourself out there, how people are packaged, that whole deal, and the hustle, right? And how difficult that is. So basically, like this already exists in the States to a certain extent, and a couple of people have it, but do you think realistically that people having an agent or like a group of poets having an agent would be useful, better for the scene, better for a group of poets, or everybody should just keep it themselves and do their own thing?
For the sake of time, can I suggest that maybe 2 people answer each question respectively instead of all of us answering the question?
And are there any last questions in the room, especially from anyone who hasn't spoken, that needs to be shared before we have our final wrap up?
Where do babies come from?
There's a
I mean, really quick, just speaking to what Alyssa said, I mean, like, I've been producing events and music and things for about 15 years now, and I've, made money at it, done well with it, and kept day jobs just to sort of supplement things. But at what point, speaking to having an agent, but delegation in general, when you bring in other people, when can you actually trust someone with your craft and your persona and that kind of thing, put it out there? So, I mean, yeah, is there a hard limit of who can get away with this in our scene because it's relatively young? And at what point do you need other people to come in and really just help you go to a next level and start making a living at it and give them a cut?
great questions. And Barbara, don't hold it in.
It's a process question. What was your unique process around figuring out day job work that worked for you and your process? I'm just curious about how to figure it out.
Any last person in the room who hasn't spoken?
Questions.
Don't worry,
We stick to what's been asked. And
no, we're wrapping up. So these are the last questions. They're out there, and if you... That's it. I put on my bossy pants before I put on my pajama pants. All right. Last call and question period is closed. Of course, depending on their availability, you can chat with the artists afterwards. Dwayne's offered to show a press kit. I wish we had done a high-tech. We'll know how to do it better for our next panel. So thank you all for coming. This will be the final last response. So you get to say anything that's missed. We have a great question on the floor of when do you bring in people? How do you know how to trust them? Is there a limit of how many spoken word artists can be on the scene full time? How do day jobs support you? When do you know how to quit? And Alyssa, your first? Agencies. All right, and especially US versus Canada.
I don't care about US versus Canada.
Okay, good. I hope that helps. I'd like to hear from all of you one more time. Please and thank you.
Barbara, I think that it's important to have a day job if you know that spoken word at this moment can't support you. And it really depends on, I just feel like that question is so dependent on your own financial situation, what credit card debt you might have, what student debt you might have, how many mouths you have to feed, what your rent is like. It's so much based on what your own financial situation is like. Personally, I feel so very liberated and so optimistic and hopeful now that I'm just solely depending on myself as my source of income. Without any external, no side jobs, no side hustles. But I also think that sometimes that is what you have to do, and there's nothing wrong with that. There's no shame in that, and there's great pride for bringing in your own paycheck, whether that comes from being an artist or whether that comes from working for an NGO, or whether that comes from doing secretarial work. As long as you are still feeding in some way what really makes your soul dance, what makes your heart dance, then I think you're still in a good place. It just has to do with your own budgeting and what you need to live.
Soul dance. Thank you.
In regards to agency, someone once told me that you should never look for an agent will always look for you. And at that point, you know that you need one. So I've had a couple, especially when I go overseas, just because I don't know either the language or the places. It's nice to have someone facilitate that process. And for me personally, because I'm dabbling a little bit in music, which might go to the other question, there's a sort of culture there that doesn't exist in spoken word. So if I'm with a spoken word band or a group, or we're going to festivals or something like that, there's a culture there that involves agents and managers and things like that. But if I'm doing a tour of the slam scenes across the country, then no agent necessary.
Would it be helpful to have one?
For
you, like at this point?
I have like a couple in for the different circumstances.
But it just mean like if there was one for spoken word, would it help?
In Canada, would
Yeah.
it help? I don't think so. Like it would be Dwayne or it'd be like.
Well, that's why I'm asking.
But then what? Like, I think it would be. I think because we're so small still that to help each other finding show like it's all like we know everyone who runs these things, or you could find it pretty easily, and then they'll take a cut of the $125 that you're gonna get. And like, yeah, you know what I mean. I don't think it's necessary for spoken word shows from spoken word people. And then the question is, who knows spoken word better than I do, that is going to be able to find me work? And like it's no one, right? So yeah.
My thing would be the same as Ian's. I think until there's an actual infrastructure, there really isn't a need for spoken word agents. People have approached me with that, and I'm like, this makes no sense because I know everybody. So what are you going to help me to do and to find? Like, it just doesn't make sense. If you are, how Ian dabbles with music and that sort of thing, and maybe an agent would be good to get musical stuff or whatever, but for spoken word specifically, completely not necessary. We're nowhere near there, and as I said, as long as our thinking is so small, we're not going to get there anytime soon until we start focusing on the bigger picture. In terms of a day job, can't really say I ever really went that route since started this when I was 18, and I just did little part-time things when I was in university. In terms of the other question about how many poets could actually do this, that's where it gets a bit more interesting, again, because...
Well, not how many, but do you think there's a limit?
Sure, there's a limit. There's a limit to everything. I don't know what that limit would be. The problem is, again, because of the emphasis on the regular slams that we do at Roots Lounge, TPS, Mississauga, whatever, we've created but we've created a culture of whackness where
Let's name my next tour.
where again, the focus of the people is on what I'm getting out, not what I'm putting in. So you can have an infinite number of poets who are putting in, because the more people who are putting in, you find space for yourself. The more people are putting in, the whole thing expands and you find more space for people. But as it stands now, there really isn't a whole lot of space because we're only focused on such a small part of the vision, right? And this thing can and could be so much bigger, but we have to do the work to get it to those points where then more people can be able to, give and take with it.
I personally find it a little frustrating when I meet spoken word artists who haven't done the difficult and intensive work of investing in themselves. And Dwayne taught me this: if you're putting a product out there, it's a reflection of who you are. So I'm not knocking chapbooks, but I am saying that when you put something together that's stapled, or you put together a CD that looks like it was made in your basement,
you're ruining the whole shit.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's you have to have a standard.
Right.
Like when you go to a bookstore and you go to a music store, your CD or book should be able to fit on that shelf and no one should be able to tell it's a spoken word book. Your thing should be able to look like it belongs in these places. Every time we undercut, that like we have people who get on stage and speak about capitalism and then charge $10 for a CD they just burnt at home. Like, you're the biggest capitalist I've ever seen. What are you talking about? Right? Because my CD is fully packaged in plastic wrap and it's $10 and you're selling yours for $10 and you just burned it at home. There's no package. You wrote on it in marker. It's like you're undermining the whole entire thing, right? And people have to understand that if people really want to do this, you have to have integrity. You have to do it in the most professional way possible. Like,
even if that means taking it way longer than you want. Like, I didn't have merch for the first 3.5 years of being, having gigs and whatnot, I didn't have any merch. I waited until I was ready, and I waited until I had funding to do a great project. And I've always waited until I can put out something that I'm really proud of, instead of putting out something that's like half-assed.
It's important to understand that being like a decent slam poet doesn't make you a good artist, or being a good slam poet doesn't make you a good artist, or being the best slam poet doesn't make you a good artist. Like
Doesn't even make you an artist.
It doesn't make you an artist. Like a couple tens in a night doesn't really mean anything. There's so much more that's involved, and I think at the bottom line, and it breaks my heart sometimes.
No, it doesn't.
Sometimes. Like, we have to get focused on the love of the art, right? Like, at the end of the day, this is a battle for minds and morale and philosophies and topics and issues that we feel have value, right? Like, we're competing against Lil Wayne and Miley Cyrus, but they have unlimited budgets, right? So what are we going to do to make sure that our voices are heard? And we're not just speaking on ourselves, right? We're speaking about communities, we're speaking about injustices, we're speaking about things that are going on in the world, and we're connecting with people in a very positive manner, in a very influential manner. And I think we have to put the value back in the art form. I mean, this is one of the most powerful art forms that there is, but yet it's undercut by the way that we treat it. And so at the end of the day, before the resume, before the press book, before looking for a tour, just make sure that the art is amazing. And no one can be the judge of that, really, but yourself. And if you're honest with yourself, even if it's crap and you love it, and other people think it's crap, you know what I mean? It's still a value. Like, just feel the value of our work and put that energy as though we do feel it has value.
You'll talk.
So, thank you for being here intimately with us. You've shared details of your lives, and we know that you've worked to be here where you are today, and that you've actually offered something. You've given something for each of us to chew on, to think about, to take forward in our next step. And you've shared in a way that helps us and that brings up the art form, right? So I really appreciate that you've put the emphasis on who we are as a community, what we can do, and you've led the way by like actually being at the Richmond Street, by trying out a few agents, being able to give us your experience, like all of the stories that you've shared about having a personal practice, like the things you've done in your lives really make a difference to help us find a way. So,
and I just also want to say thank you to all of you for coming out on a night as cold as tonight in the Junction. I really appreciate all of you being here.
Thank you, guys.
A huge thank you for attending, everybody. So we do have a pay what you can pint glass right at the very back there on that table. So if you guys can drop any toonies, $5 bills, loonies, we always do pay what you can panels and workshops to offer it to as many people as possible, to make it accessible to as many people as possible. But if you do have anything to offer these awesome panelists who are trying to make their living, right? Being a full-time poet, your money to help them. It all comes full circle. Our next show is this Sunday at the Draco.